Welcome to another episode of the Mapscaping Podcast. My name is Daniel, and this is a podcast for the geospatial community. And today, I'm the only one here. It's just me. Solo episode today. And today, I want to talk about my experiments with AI. Not because they're amazing, but because I'm hoping they will inspire you to experiment with AI. But first, a little context. So if you've been following this podcast for a while, you may have noticed that I had stopped publishing podcasts for about a year or so. I was pretty burnt out. It takes a lot more time than you might imagine to produce a podcast, or at least to produce this podcast. And if I'm being honest, I didn't really miss producing the podcast until now. But then, the last year has also been pretty busy. Even though I was born and raised in New Zealand, moving back here from Denmark with my family has not been without its challenges. And there have been a few major life events along the way. We now have a teenage daughter in the house. My wife and I have started a new business. I have been learning to live with depression. And I buried my father. Now, there is nothing exceptional about any of those things. Your kids grow up, lots of people start new businesses. The percentage of people who experience some sort of mental illness in their lifetime is pretty high, and children are supposed to bury their parents. But these events did take up a lot of space that used to be filled with something else. And at some point, you need to make a decision. And much like when you move to a new house, you need to decide what you're going to keep and what you're going to throw away. And for a while, podcasting needed to be put in storage. So what changed? Why start podcasting again now? Well, eventually you figure out a way of dealing with grief. You stop mourning the way things were, and you start focusing on the way it could be, the way you want things to be. And before you know it, you have more space in your life. Space for that stuff that you put in storage and for new things that catch your eye. And this is where AI comes into the picture. AI got me excited about ideas again, because all of a sudden, I could just make the things myself. I didn't need to pitch the idea to anyone. I didn't need to decide what to spend my limited financial resources on. I could just make stuff. For the first time, I could have an idea and I could just build it myself. And that excitement translated into motivation to start publishing the podcast again. Before I share some of my experiences, I just want to address this idea of AI slop. I understand why people refer to some AI content as slop, but for people like us, people who understand that this is a tool and not just a shortcut, I don't think this is helpful. We don't refer to our first clumsy experiments with other technologies as slop. The first map you created, was that slop? What about the second map or the third? Was that slop? Your first few lines of code, hello world, were they slop? And what about all of those lines of AI-generated code that enable the new features in your favorite piece of software? Is that slop too? My gut feeling is that we are more than happy with some AI content. And the stuff we don't like, well, that is clearly slop. And I think if we want to encourage experimentation and curiosity, pointing at the results of other people trying to discover what is possible and calling it slop isn't going to help. And today I'm going to share with you my AI experiments, again, in the hope that it encourages you to go out and experiment with AI. For me, it all started with generating SEO-style articles as a marketing tool and led to creating a Chrome extension that thousands of people now use. So search engine optimization sounds like a dirty word. Honestly, it's the only reason this podcast still exists. And that's probably a subject for another day. But I think in general, marketing gets a bad rap. So the idea of search engine optimization, SEO, is pretty simple. You publish relevant content to the audience that you're seeking to serve. Google finds that. If it's good enough, it will show this content to the people that you are looking to attract to your site. They will come to your site. And in my case, hopefully they'll come to my site and they will discover the podcast. Now, I'm dyslexic. Now, I've learned a bunch of ways of coping with this, but I'm still very dyslexic. So over the years, I've paid freelancers thousands of dollars to help create content for my website because I couldn't create it myself, or it would take too long for me to create myself. And if you have ever received an email from me, you will know what I'm talking about. And if you are one of those extremely kind people that point out the spelling mistakes in the podcast titles and show notes, you will also understand what I'm talking about. So I started playing around with AI to produce SEO optimized content. And to be honest, at the start, it wasn't that great. You can still find some of my early experiments on the website if you poke around. And they're not exactly my finest work. And Google has also recognized this, and that's why they don't rank in organic search. But through this experimentation, I learned about context windows, the importance of prompting. You might have heard of prompt engineering, which models and tools I could use for which tasks. I played around with automation platforms like Make.com, N8N, and Zapier. I also built some of my own agents to help me. So at the start, these were custom GPTs or Claude projects. And then I started creating my own agents. And I've even experimented with voice agents using platforms like 11 Labs, Vappy. And at one stage there, I published and used a MCP server using a platform called Custom GPT. If you haven't heard about or played around with MCP servers, I think they are incredibly interesting. I think these are actually the apps of the future. But maybe we can talk about that another time. It's funny what you learn along the way. Remember, my goal was to create SEO content for my website, to attract the right kind of person to my website so they could discover the podcast. This whole thing was a marketing play for me. But at some point, I realized that you can just ask ChatGPT to use GeoPandas to do data conversions, GeoJSON to KML or shapefile. You can ask it to create a buffer around geometries and reproject data. You can upload screenshots to it of tables from a PDF and have it converted to CSV files. I wouldn't blindly trust anything that came out of an LLM, for critical work. There's no way. But it has been interesting to play around with these things and start learning like where it makes mistakes and perhaps even why it makes some mistakes and what I can trust it for. And so, again, I don't think you should blindly trust them, especially for professional work, but you should definitely be experimenting with them. So speaking of GIS-related tasks, if you go to aistudio.google.com, you can play around with Gemini. You can build apps there. And one of the really interesting things you can do with Gemini, because it's multimodal, you can literally talk with it. So if you share your screen with Gemini, and again, you might want to think about privacy issues here, but if you share your screen with Gemini while you're working in QGIS, for example, it can talk you through the problem that you're working on and help you solve it. Now, is it perfect? Absolutely not. But it's getting dramatically better with every new model release. And now, today, I use AI on a regular basis. I use it to create plugins and automations for QGIS. Because I work remotely and I am the only GIS person on some of the projects I work on, I don't have any colleagues that I can talk to, that I can bounce ideas off and get feedback from. So I use AI as a sparring partner and to help me understand and solve problems when I get stuck. And for me, like the easiest way is I use ChatGPT for this, OpenAI, happily pay my $20 a month, and I push the button on my phone and I just talk to it. And it's unbelievable. And yes, again, all of this comes with a health warning. You need to be critical about what's coming out of it. And it's not always correct. Not at all. But has it been tremendously helpful for me? Yes, it has. It's been amazing, and it's getting better. So while all this was going on, organic search was changing. More and more people were starting to use LLMs as answer engines. Instead of searching on Google, they'll just go directly to an LLM. And Google introduced something called AI overviews, which basically just gives you the answer. So these large language models were becoming answer engines, and they're no longer distributing traffic out to websites like mine, like they had done in the past. And to be honest, this is exactly what I do too. For the most part, I think it's a much better experience asking a large language model than sifting through multiple websites that are all trying to form some sort of relationship with me. Of course, this depends on the kind of question I have and the kind of problem I'm trying to solve. If it's really important to get right, I'll do the research myself. But even then, oftentimes as a first pass, like a large language model just does a better job. So this is when I started to use AI to write code. You might have heard of the term vibe coding. So for me, watching this happen, watching large language models turn into the answer engines of the internet, it's pretty clear to me that informational content on the internet was going to be completely dominated by AI, which meant I needed a new strategy. AI is great at generating content. And it can be exceptional content as well. But if you need to create contours for your plot of land in the small town that you live in on the top of the South Island of New Zealand, you don't want generated data that looks reasonable. You want actual data. You want real data. And so my new marketing strategy is to create targeted mapping applications and embed them in my website. There is a ton of open and incredibly valuable data out there. What it's missing is for someone to show up and use it to solve very specific problems. So I refer to this as single serve map applications that do one thing and one thing only. They're not filled with thousands of layers. They have 1-2 layers in them and they do very specific tasks. And this allows me to rank in organic search because these are problems that LLMs have not mastered yet. And I think there's probably a little ways to go before they actually can. So to create these apps, I started off using ChatGPT to code small client-side map applications. Then I moved to Claude, which is actually significantly better than OpenAI's models. And it's still my coding model of choice. And today I use something called Cursor AI as a development environment and swap between Claude Code, OpenAI's Codex, and the different models that are available within Cursor. And oftentimes I'll have several of these things running at once. Just a quick note about Claude Code and OpenAI's Codex. Again, if you haven't played around with these things, especially for people in the geospatial industry, if you do anything with code, they are incredible. Or if you do anything at all that needs to be automated and you're not an extremely skilled programmer, I would definitely have a look into these things. Recently, they've come out with the ability to create agents within these environments, and they've made it incredibly easy. And basically, you can create experts in various different subjects, and the environment will just hand off to the various experts as it moves through the task. So I'm probably not doing a great job of explaining how it works, but it's worth looking into and experimenting with. So it's important to note here that these don't always work, and using AI to code can be incredibly frustrating. Once your code reaches a certain scale, you'll notice that a significant drop in the quality of the code being produced and the development process slows down dramatically. And at times I've simply hit a wall and abandoned projects. But for me, this is all part of the learning experience. But no matter what, it's still 1,000 times better and faster than what I could do myself. And like I said earlier, it makes my ideas possible. Now, there are a lot of people out there that are going out of their way to point out the flaws in AI-generated code. And I understand where they're coming from. And there's a lot of flaws. It's not a silver bullet like all of the thread boys on X are claiming it is. But I think the side of the argument that is missing is that in the vast majority of use cases, mediocre code is good enough. So after experimenting with creating these map applications that I embedded in my website, I got better and better at things. I learned where I was making my mistakes and how to preemptively fix them or avoid them through various prompts and context that I could give to the models. And I decided to try and build other things like a Chrome extension. Now, every GIS person will be able to relate to this. You see data that you want to use in a web map, open up developer tools in your web browser, hit the networking tab, and start sifting through HTTP calls looking for the URL for the web service that you want to use, and then removing the right parameters from that so you get a URL that you can paste into QGIS or ArcGIS and use it yourself. Now, for the longest time, I thought that a browser extension would be a fantastic way to solve this problem. I've pitched the idea to multiple developers. They were either uninterested or going to charge me between 10 to 15,000 to build it. And that's fine. It's not a critique of them, but it just meant that this idea was impossible for me to create. But with AI, I had a minimum viable Chrome extension that filtered out common geo web services within 3 hours. It took a few days working on it on and off before it was ready to publish to the Chrome Web Store. And today, the extension is called GeoHound, or I'll put a link to that in the show notes. And if you search for it, you will find GeoHound for Chrome and for Edge browsers. So in the Chrome store, it shows that GeoHound has 1,000 users, but my own bare minimum statistics suggest that that number is closer or perhaps even over 3,000 now. I haven't checked for a while. And is GeoHound perfect? Absolutely not. But it is clearly good enough. And bearing in mind, this is something that was impossible, for me at least, for 6 months ago. So what can we learn from all this, and what is my point with this rant? Well, AI is here. And even if it stopped improving now, it's still here. And it's going to lead to profound change. And in my humble opinion, experimenting with AI is going to do two things. Firstly, it'll help you develop the skills and knowledge you need to meet the needs of the people you are seeking to serve. Secondly, experimenting with AI will help you better understand what is hype and what is not. A lot of people are capitalizing on the AI hype right now, and most of it is completely self-serving. Having your own experiences to draw on will help you decipher which voices to listen to, which in turn will help you form your own picture of what this new AI-first world might look like and how you might fit into it. So now is the time to be making sloppy mistakes. Don't let perfection get in the way of you learning how to make stuff that is going to be good enough. We are moving from a world where information is ubiquitous to a world where knowledge is ubiquitous. And we have to decide what that means for us. In the short term, I think it will mean that it'll become even more important to be known, liked, and trusted by the people that we work for. And that if your work consists of doing repetitive tasks that can be solved by following step-by-step recipes, well, I think that's going to be a really tough gig going forward. Long term, I am sure there will be new opportunities. But I'm also sure that if you are not experimenting with AI, you might not be in a position to take advantage of them. And who knows? Maybe you'll learn something and have some fun along the way. Okay, that's it from me. Thank you very much for listening all the way to the end. I really appreciate it. You'll find a list of the tools that I have been experimenting with the show notes. And if you build anything interesting with them, please let me know. I'd love to hear about what you're experimenting with. I'll be back again soon. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.